Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your hosts, Aalia and Alex and Alexandra Checa.
Hello, everybody. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I'm Aalia.
I'm Alexandra.
And we're here to give you some unsugar-coated loving today. How's been your week so far, Alexandra?
My week has been amazing.
Yeah.
I'm getting married this year, so I finally have my venue, I have my dress.
Wow.
It's all good.
That's huge because you didn't
good.
know where you were going to do it. So.
No. I had no clue. I was like, maybe my backyard. If I don't have anything planned.
That would, that would be
But how was your weekend?
Good. Busy. And, the news keeps me busy, I swear. I feel like, just so people know, I constantly look for sources of information, not just as a human being, but also for the show. And some of these stories that come out bring topics that I want to talk about. So, yeah, there's one in particular that kind of struck me. And I know by the time this airs, people will be like, oh, but the situation, as always, remains relevant to me. So, Snoop Dogg. I love Snoop Dogg. I love who he's become. I love that he's been able to reinvent himself. I'm a huge supporter of him in general. And for people who don't know, recently when Gayle King had conducted her interview post Kobe's death, she brought up the rape allegations. And people came for Gayle, and Snoop was one of them.
Yeah.
So I have to tell a kind of a true confession on this little story for me, because when my best friend sent me the video, I watched it up until actually kind of the end. So I actually didn't even watch the full thing, talk about people's space attention. I was like, okay, you're mad. Yeah, I get you. You're mad at her. And then I shut it off. Then I started seeing about, other information coming out, and I went back and I watched it. And so pretty much up until the first thing I saw, I was like, okay, I get it. You're upset. I totally get that. But then when I saw what he called her and how he spoke to her, it really hit me hard. And I was like, ooh, Snoop, you had me up until that part, calling her out of her name. Now, since then, which is one thing I'm glad we don't jump on everything. Since then, he has come back. My best friend and I had a conversation, and I was like, I go, look, he did that action right there was not right. Then he came back and put a post that his mother sat him down, which I was so glad he admitted that. And that he apologized. He apologized for how he spoke to her.
Yes, I respect that. However, as an almost 15-year-old man, your mom still has to sit you down to tell you how to act. Like, that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I wish he would have thought better, because that is my thing. Like, even when I had the initial conversation about it, I said, listen, we get mad, we get angry, and that's okay. But I think that it's just you're an example. You're an example.
I think he has forgotten how much influence and how many people know of him.
Well, I think his apology shows that he remembers that. But I mean, like, in that moment of anger, and that's kind of what leads me to this conversation about speech today and what we're doing with it, where we have a lot of people who just feel, look, unsugar-coated is a concept that we're going to say what we mean and how we feel, and that's true, but that doesn't mean be an asshole.
You don't have to be an asshole.
That gives me permission to be a jerk or insensitive or, uncompassionate, because we do live in this society. If you have any platform at all, people react to what you say and do. And
they're hyper reactive nowadays. So you have to be extra careful.
Extra careful. The accountability is high, my friend. With everything that we say on the air, you and I have had conversations off air. What we say, we feel accountable.
Yep.
We feel a responsibility and compelled to be honest and authentic. But never do we want to cut people down. And I have a big problem in this whole society where men and women, men should not feel permission or that they can just talk to people like that, and especially a woman. It's very hostile, it's very aggressive. People were giving her death threats and whatnot. Not that that's all Snoop's fault, because, by the way, I mean, not that those people necessarily were reacting to what Snoop said. I mean, a lot of people outside of that had a reaction, but how we handle those things as a society and as leaders in our society. And yes, Snoop Dogg is a leader. He's a freaking amazing businessman.
He is. And I think that if he had thought this through, I think that if he went out and put a message with no cussing, no yelling, like calm down, and actually said something, that his message would have gone completely way further.
Oh, I agree.
People would have actually listened to him. But like you, right, you had just said, I watched the video, I get it, you're mad, turn it off.
Right.
So because it's like all up on your face and you're like, okay, whatever. I think that if he was like, you know, if he knew how to manage his emotions at that point, things would have, his point would have been golden.
Well, and then, that's fair, because even as a leader, sometimes I tell people, don't put me on some pedestal. I get it. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. But exactly, your emotional intelligence is shown by how you handle those crazy situations.
Yeah.
Are you going to freaking... Because it's not so much just about what Snoop said to Gayle. It's then that impression of our young men growing up that they can do that. Like we live in LA. People cut each other off all the time. I've seen a man get out of his car and approach a woman over just getting cut off. Like, who do you think you are to get out of the car and approach a woman like that?
Yeah.
Like, that's just, it's really not cool. And, it can lead to legal liabilities, which we have, completely... all of this is going to really tie into our, episode today, because we're not going to just have these conversations alone. We've actually brought an incredible, trial attorney to
Yes,
to
we
talk
did,
on
because
it.
we're getting serious.
Yeah, and that's so. Without further ado, let me talk about him. Recently featured in Boss Man magazine, Byron J. Abron, or BJ, is a civil trial attorney with recognition as top 40 under 40, top 100 in the state of California, as well as SuperLawyer Rising Star. A member of the executive board for Downtown Los Angeles Bar Association, he has appeared on various media networks as co-host and special guest for legal news telecast and radio commentary. When not advocating for his clients, BJ is a coach for Southwestern Law School's Trial Advocacy Honors Program, and inspiring youth in the community at large. We are happy to have him today out of the courtroom and from dockets to empower our audience. Everyone, please welcome BJ Abron.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate you guys for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. And I hope, based on our intro convo, you can understand why we really are excited to have you as part of this conversation. We need you to be part of this conversation.
For sure.
So, first of all, tell the audience a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what you do today, what your focus is.
So I am born and raised in Compton, California. I'm a civil trial attorney, as you indicated, which means that I try civil matters, which is generally cases that deal with money damages, right? Mm-hmm. My cases typically are personal injury cases where someone has been wronged by others, whether it ranges from wrongful death cases to soft tissue cases, sometimes with vehicle collisions, or where individuals may get injured at a concert or shootings or things of that nature, where there's a third party to sue. And so that's pretty much what I do. I try those kind of cases. I come in where other attorneys may have retained a client and they need to bring somebody in to litigate the case and or try the case, depending on what stage it's in.
Sure.
So that's pretty much my primary area of focus. I do a couple other things outside that, but pretty much that's my day-to-day.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So you're a young man from Compton. Like,
yes.
we're talking about Snoop. I know he's from Long Beach, LBC. You're from
next
Compton.
door.
I actually used to own Metro PCS store, as anyone who knows my business background, and our number one store was in Compton, right there on Rosecrans and Alfreda. And it's very interesting because I remember my ex-husband used to always say, well, we're in the good part of Compton.
Where's that again?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, all jokes aside, though, I loved our community. I loved our people. I loved our employees. Obviously, we hired from people within that community.
Good.
And so you're now an attorney. Let me ask, you're in Compton, you meet a young man, he says, I want to grow up and be like you. How would something like that make you feel if that has happened so far? I know you're working with youth.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. In fact, it happened last week. So I implemented a program at University Pathways Public Service Academy, which is like borderline Watts, LA area. A good friend of mine, Principal Raw, we actually grew up together in Compton, and he's the principal of this school. It's a completely innovative school. The stuff that they're doing is just crazy. And so I implemented an 8-week program, which we call the U Law School Society, the U Law Society. And so I come in, basically, I bring in other attorneys, different background, LGBT, Latina, male. I just like to bring in a completely different set of individuals to show these kids that they can be whatever they want to be, despite where you come from, what you look like, what your beliefs are. And so I get that on a regular basis. Last week was the first week for this semester, and right afterwards I had 2 kids to say, hey, I want to be an attorney. Like, how do I become an attorney? I want, so that's what the program is about. When I was their age, I didn't have people telling me that I can be an attorney. I didn't see people, I saw athletes, I saw rappers, and on the occasion where certain people were brought in, it was maybe a police officer, where at my time, we was hearing fuck the police.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be a police officer.
Right.
So, I get that. It warms my heart. I love it because it tells me that at that young age, something has been done different than when I was that age, where somebody's actually there to inspire these kids, and they're starting to see. And obviously, we got social media nowadays,
right,
so
right.
things are drastically different, which probably will transition to our conversation about the First Amendment, because it opens the door for a lot more than what we had when we were young.
Yeah. And the amazing thing about this is that you don't really know how much of an impact you're having, because like you grew up in Compton, where like being a lawyer was not really kind of like a reality,
It was never a thought.
It was never a thought. And like, I grew up in a community too, where I really, honestly, completely, I did not think I could make more than like $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Like the idea of like making 80, I was like, whoa, I am rich. I'm gonna buy myself a brand new Corolla, and like, I'm set for life, until I met someone who looked like me, who was Latina, who looked like me, and she was making completely more, like the most successful person I've ever met in my life, and I was like, wow, I can do this.
That's funny. I had something like that, and this was, I think, I may have been around 17 or 18 years old, and I thought that there was only a certain amount of people that had money.
Right.
And so from Compton, like one of the closest area where you see a wealth change is like Palos Verdes. And so I would drive. I had a friend of mine at the time who kind of opened my eyes, my ears to a lot. And we would go to Palos Verdes, and that's where I was like, wow, it's a lot of people with money. And so it's like the tire, it started to spin.
Yeah, I actually have to tell you, it's funny that you say that. And it's going to be really interesting that you say that, because now I got to tell this story. So when I got married, my current husband and I, we moved to Palos Verdes Estates 3 years ago. Yeah, 3.5, because I was pregnant with Sophia. Beautiful community. We did it because the schools are great. We wanted our kids to have the best schools, and they are. Like 90% of the kids graduate straight into university from high school. It is it is crazy. And but my husband's driving to Beverly Hills in the office, and I always needed to be in LA, and so one of the things that happened since we moved out to Palos Verdes is that the rents continued to increase here in LA. Crazy. Well, when we decided after 2 years, we were like, we need to move back. We love Palos Verdes. I love my ocean view, but we need to be where we need to be. So ironically enough, we picked a house in View Park up on the hill. Beautiful. A 5,000 square foot home, by the way. A pool, an Olympic sized freaking pool. I had a tennis court. Okay. And
a lot different than the Corolla, right?
Very different. I think it's very
this was
different.
in View Park, but can I tell you, this was a very, very interesting experience to have. Being in View Park, of course, I learned that View Park was the Black Beverly Hills, right? And you had all your doctors, and you had your, orthopedic surgeons or whatever, and it was there were people who were like, "Where are you living at?" "Oh, I'm in View Park." They're like, "Where the heck is View Park?" I'm like, "It's Crenshaw."
Right.
I'm 5 minutes from where Nipsey Hussle unfortunately got shot. It's, right there by the Baldwin Hills Shopping Center.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what happened in that community. A Christmas time came, carolers came in the street. People in the community actually do more. Martin Luther King, everyone's out.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a sense of community. Is it a little bit scary for times? I think for anybody it's like that. I remember Tupac one time saying, it's not just white people that are afraid in these urban areas where you could get shot. Other communities feel it too. Anybody in there, right? And it was such an experience. It was such a, it just really was a great thing to even give my kids that
Right.
experience of understanding
Right.
that, yes, this may seem like a different community, but that does not mean it's not beautiful or,
Right.
or offer something wonderful as you have. So that's great that
Yeah.
you're able to now like pass it on, pay it forward, and influence these. Who was your main influence at growing up? Like who was somebody you looked up to?
It's relative to like what we're talking about, because at some points I looked up to Tupac, you
Right.
know, like for his the same part of the same reason why I looked up to Kobe, and I know that this is fresh, and it was the same reason I looked up to Tupac, was because they had this mentality about them that they really didn't care.
Right.
You know, like when Kobe was younger in his career, he airballed 2 critical shots and he didn't care. He's like, I'm going to come back and shoot.
Right.
That's what I'm here to do.
Right.
So it's that mentality that made me look up to them, because for me, I've been in so many different circumstances, so many different environments with people who don't look like me, didn't sound like me. My voice has changed, or the way I pronounce words has changed
Right.
drastically over the last 15 years. And so for me, I had to like adopt that mentality that at the end of the day, I don't know if we're cussing on this show
Yeah,
or not,
you
but
can,
who
it's
gives a
not hard.
fuck, right?
Yeah.
This is me. This is
Yeah.
who I am. And so with respect to something like that, I would say guys like that. My parents laid a great foundation for me. And so I'm not one of those people who like had a household where it was crazy stuff going on in the household. I just, wasn't the best kid at certain points. I was actually good in school with respect to not getting in trouble. My sisters did good with grades. I had a lot of fails at some points, and I did C's and B's at some points. And then in the community, I got active with a number of different things at different points in time in my life, and it just took me on a path where it was like, what am I doing? But you get caught,
Right.
with these people, you see these people, they see you with them, and it's like, oh, that's your family. What do you
Right.
do? So, I had different moments where I looked to different people for different things. I think for me, I was fortunate enough to survive, and it sounds so bad saying that, but oftentimes that's what it is. I survived long enough without getting a record and without being shot or killed. And I got a lot of friends who unfortunately did not make it, who
Right.
I, having conversations, those being my buddies, know that they were a lot smarter than I was. And so that foundation that my parents laid for me at a certain point, it actually came into play and started, to turn my wheels a little bit
Sure.
differently. So for me, I'd have to say probably my parents are something that I looked up to. At a certain point with respect to what got me towards law school and stuff, I had different mentors at different points. Ricky Ivey was a mentor of mine. His firm is Ivey McNeil Wyatt. I think it's the biggest black law firm in California. And when I say black, I think black owned.
Right.
There's a lot of people that work there. But I was at a certain point where I was working for the city of LA, and I was actually just trying to figure out more. I wanted more at this point, so I was going to go back to get a master's in business. And he basically said, well, listen, just consider going to law school. A lot of people have masters in business today, and they don't necessarily use it. If you go to law school, you can get your Juris Doctorate degree, which is not the same as a master's.
Right.
It's on the same level,
That's-
though.
Yeah. Look.
But if you ever want to practice, you take the bar
Right.
and you can practice law. That's what really, and I had thought about practicing that a little bit before that, don't get me wrong, but that's what really opened my door to kind of move in that direction. So I'd say he was probably really critical for me at that point in time to get me really going towards law school.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's really key too, to break this perception. And I have to say this, that there are not a good families in quote unquote the hood in South Central or
Yeah.
Compton or, any of these areas, Crenshaw. And also that they're not smart.
Oh,
Like, come on, man. You got to, like, people, we need to think better. You're in, when you said the grades too, there are people who are just not challenged enough in certain schools. Their grades
Yeah.
are not necessarily
Yeah.
reflective of your intelligence.
Oh, not at all. Not at
And
all.
so, but it is, and it's funny because, yeah, I will agree with you. Like, people ask me, how did I survive? And how did I, to some degree, luck plays a slight little
Yes.
factor in that.
Yes.
It does. We'd be lying to say not, right?
And and in fact, I don't like when people say, BJ, you're an example that anybody can make it out, because it's just not the truth.
Yeah.
I get it's a saying, and it pays homage to me as someone who made it out, but it was luck, and not even just a little bit. It was a lot of luck for me to actually make it that far. So it's not, if it was a person may have been right next to me that wasn't as lucky as me,
Right.
and they didn't make it. So
Right.
it's not, we don't have a roadmap to say that anybody can just prance on out of the hood or
Sure.
prance on out of these circumstances that, like I say, it acts as gravity mechanisms to keep you grounded
Right.
in that area and not let you detach and like move on. It's not just anybody can just do it. It takes a lot of different mechanisms to make sure that you're actually able to navigate out.
Absolutely. It does take effort. And like you said, too, and sometimes our purpose, and going back to Kobe, you know, the man had such purpose and he did so much. We feel like he had so much left to do. But like when you talk about luck and me being in the cancer community, like that's why I'm saying, like, I have just definitely learned, okay, today I have a purpose because I'm still here. So what can I do?
Right.
You know, what that time, because everything can change in a second, and we just continue, you know, but it does take that. I mean, because like Kobe, he got up at 5 a.m. and you know, you did going through the
Working.
bar. I went to law school, and it was funny because, and so I want to pick your brain on this because one of the first things I learned in law school was that, you know, I went into it with this, it's all about the justice and I want to help people. And then you start to learn the law and you realize real quick, it's actually not always about justice. It's about who has the better argument, who can find the
Yep.
loophole.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's crazy because I shared with you even in our pre-conversation, like studying criminal defense, it was exhausting emotionally and energy because you realize how many things people get away with.
Oh, yes.
And when we talk about, you know, what our judicial system looks like, how it's abused, how it's manipulated, how it's, you know, I mean, the list of what happens in it is, and it's a lot of unjust things that happen.
Right.
So moving into that, because some of our audience doesn't really understand what civil law is, and we want to educate. So can you give me your definition of civil law?
Yeah, I mean, so there's, as a background, there's a ton of areas, like, and I'm sure you know this, before you even become an attorney, once you go to law school, everyone thinks you know everything about every aspect of law.
Yeah.
And you're like, listen, this has nothing to do with what I'm going to school for, or what I plan on practicing. And now as an attorney, same here. There's like so many different areas.
Right.
And so civil law, in the general respect, you have civil and you have criminal law, right? And so a lot of people, what we see on TV, when we're seeing them in the courtroom, that's oftentimes criminal law cases where you have a prosecutor, someone has been accused of committing a crime. You have a prosecutor, they're prosecuting, defense attorney defending the person. And so it's very similar to that, except for it's just dealing with money matters, right?
Mhm.
And so in my situation, we often deal with, and when I say money matters, it's not just a contractual dispute. For instance, someone breached a contract and you have a loss of profits as a result of it. We're actually dealing with situations where you can't just put a tangible value
Right.
on a dollar to dollar value. I just
Sure.
got a client, just have a case recently that I signed up where a client lost their father, right? And so what's the value of a lost life? How do you put a dollar amount on that, right?
Right.
Or if you're dealing with pain every single day or you lost a limb, what's the value of going the rest of your life without that? How much money is that worth? And so when I go in front of juries, that's what I'm talking about. What's the value? This is what happened. This is what she's been dealing with. This is what the doctors are going to say in the future. And so what's the value of every single day, this client, this person, a human being, going without their father,
Mhm.
Sure.
going without their mother, or going without their leg? So that's really what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis with respect to that aspect of civil law. Civil law is all-encompassing as well. Like I said, contractual disputes. When I was in law school, I worked at Viacom, so that's like entertainment law.
Mhm.
All of that still falls under civil law as well.
Sure. And, you know, we have people nowadays that are so sue happy. Actually, a little bit less now that they've put within the legal system back in the day when you could just sue for anything, frivolous lawsuits. We actually had more attorneys in California than in like the rest of the country combined. Seriously, this is like 20 years ago statistics, but I kid you not. Now you have things like, if you file a lawsuit and then it gets shown that you were just being whatever under motion, summary judgment, whatever, then you can end up paying. Like even if you're the plaintiff, you can end up paying. So they've put these little, things in place so that to deter people from just clogging up the judicial system. But it's still clogged up. And we have a lot of people that go around. It's funny when we talked about the freedom of speech thing, because my daughter just yesterday, my 12-year-old, was like, First Amendment rights. I can say what I'm feeling. And I was like, yeah, well, mom rights say, only if I say you can. No.
Right.
But when we look at the judicial system, a lot of people feel like that's mom and dad who will smack your hand or, take away your toys if you do something wrong, right?
Right.
But we have those complexities within them. How do you feel that with still people suing each other and sue happy? Where do you see the benefits of the civil law, but also where do you see like the breakdown on society?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good point. When I'm in trial, the first question I ask during voir dire or jury selection is really about lawsuits. I want to know, because I want my client to receive compensation for the injuries that they sustained, and I'm not bringing a frivolous lawsuit. But you bring that point, a lot of people have this concept that, oh, he was injured in a vehicle collision, or this person, or let's say a slip and fall, something like that. That it's frivolous in nature because you have heard of so many different frivolous lawsuits, and it sucks that we have to deal with that because my clients suffer as a result of that. It happens.
Right.
Some people do weird stuff and will set up a mechanism to fall or whatever they do, and feel like they want to find compensation. But when I'm in a jury, when I'm dealing with jurors and selecting jurors, that's the first thing I talk about because that's not this case. And so I want to get those jurors who think about that. I need them off my panel. I don't want them making a decision on my case. Question is, does it happen? Yeah. I mean, people file frivolous lawsuits sometimes, you know. Some attorneys will take cases,
right,
you know, and say, oh, okay, well, I think I can manipulate this, you know. It just doesn't do the justice system any good. But the reality is there is no perfect justice system, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we're dealing with oftentimes is the battle of rights, right? And when we talk about the First Amendment, you know, it's the battle of right. How much can you say? You know,
right.
and I think that's what you were talking about earlier. Like, you have the right or the freedom of speech, but like you don't have the freedom to be an asshole, is what you said. Technically speaking, you do. And so now, but when the First Amendment was drafted or enacted, you didn't have social media. You didn't have stuff like this where people can now have an event that takes place, and right when that event takes place, they can express their emotions immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
No filter. Like, it just goes out 5 minutes later. Why the fuck did I say that?
Right, right.
Like, we talking about Snoop Dogg. Like,
yeah, did you watch it?
I didn't. I saw that, and you saw him. I don't want to talk about it too much, but you saw him leading up to it, and he's basically asking the viewers for permission to say it. It's kind of how I got it. I was like, oh, he's getting ready to say it.
Right.
He's like asking permission almost to say it, and I'm like, damn, he said it. You
right.
know?
Yeah.
Like, you just can't do that because you lose all the validity in what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just like, why, you know, but he's caught in his emotions, and he's just like, he's really on some, you know, I don't care right now. I'm going to say whatever. But on the back end, after his mother talks to him.
Yeah, and you know, as an artist, that's fair, because a
Don't do
lot of
that.
artists, you know, I know for me, it's like I got to speak my truth and I've got to, you know, but there is, and I mean, look, especially with society right now where there's such a, oh my God, people treat each other very, you know, people want to pull the whole, it's still in this today's society, if somebody behaves a certain way, then they want to blame their background on that. They want to blame where they're from. Like, I literally one time had my two of my kids were walking to school. A woman who was just somehow thought that was so bad. She actually told me, she was like, "Oh, I know you're Muslim, and that's why you know, I know what kind of mother you are." I'm like, what the heck?
Wow.
Like, what, first, you don't even know my name. You don't know how I am, and you know, and so we have that society, right, where we constantly feel like we have to represent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about that? Like, as a black man, being candid, like, what do you feel you give voice and image to something today that we feel we fight for?
That's a ongoing challenge, an ongoing battle. Like, people ask me, what was one of the biggest hurdles to becoming an attorney or transitioning from here to there, and is maintaining who you are as an individual, because, like I said, the way I talk was drastically different than the way I talk now. Right. Not to say that I sound super square or whatever. I don't know what the perception is of how I sound, but it was definitely different. And I had to keep in mind the environments that I was going to go into, law school setting or business meetings before I even went to law school, because I was involved in various different areas of business. You know, I couldn't just walk in there how I was. I had to clean up, right? And so how do you maintain who you are? Because maintaining who you are is part of actually what the ultimate message is going to be, where you're giving back. Just like, whatever it is, if my image is bad, if I walk in and I have a horrible image, not only is it affecting me, I think getting back to your point is it could have an effect, or the weight
Right.
at least that we carry when you're going into a situation. If you're the only woman going into a room full of men for a meeting, what weight do you carry as the only woman where it's not just you that's going to suffer because you don't close the deal? It's like these guys are now going to have a depiction on the next woman that comes in.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of weight with that. And, it's unfair, but it's reality.
It is, and I know it is. I get you. Like, even myself as a woman, and the thing that strikes me when you talk about that is, I grew up in Napa, and I've learned to just explain to people, I have different sides of my personality. Sometimes I talk like this. Sometimes I talk like girl,
Right.
but like I have 1,000 different accents, and I have different personalities. I'm not, I remember one time I said something, they're like, "Oh, you're ghetto." I'm like, ghetto because I just don't have to talk like this all the time. That makes
Right.
me ghetto. No, that makes me confident in just what I'm saying, and I have character. But sometimes you're right. People will perceive character as like, oh, well, not, again, going back to the not intelligent or not capable or
Yeah.
not qualified,
Yep.
right? So it's something. So what has been?
Actually, before we
Yeah.
move on, I have a question that's literally bothering me. You can see me thinking about it in the camera. I'm like,
Sorry.
So when it comes to freedom of speech, it's something that we love defending, right? We say freedom of speech, America, especially from someone that's not from here. I mean, freedom of speech is amazing. However, there seems to be that for you to utilize that right, there has to be the right place at the right time. Because sometimes you might say something and the other person doesn't agree, and they feel the permission to attack you back. And so you can say, well, I'm using my freedom of speech, and the other person can say, I'm also using my freedom of speech. But then because you don't agree with what I'm saying, then what I'm saying it turns out to be hateful, or like, well, this is the reason why a lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump never say they voted for Donald Trump. Ever. They don't put it on their social media.
I know a lot of people who voted for Trump, and they are very brazen and
No, I'm
proud
saying
about it.
I'm saying for some people, like I know people that have voted for him and they don't put it on the social media. They don't put it on
sure.
Facebook. They don't talk about it. But like, it's my freedom of speech to say, yes, I voted for him. But the incredible amount of violence that you get back.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is like the backlash that comes with expressing
Right.
whatever your thoughts and sentiments are on something. And, that's just the reality of, again, like we say, the Constitution is really, of course, it sets forth certain things where there's right and wrong, but it's really about the balance of rights. And so if you have an expression of something, for instance, Donald Trump, you say something about it, someone else, they have the same right as you
Right.
to express their discern or their other opinion, about it. And it's really just the balancing of it,
But I think it's the people that are attacking the other person for voting for a certain person that are all about freedom of speech. But then when someone is sharing their freedom of speech, they get really upset because they don't agree with what they're saying. You know?
And just to be clear, I know you gave the example of Donald Trump, but you and I both, I do know what you mean, but I know people on all, like people who voted for Bernie who felt the same and they couldn't, like, the whole Hillary Bernie thing, and with elections coming up, we remain always here neutral and try and like just have conversations. But I think what must be valuable as an attorney and as a black man and as an attorney, just, and knowing what I've studied, like I remember I see a lot of things in movies that are based on case law that I studied. And one in particular was the Love family, the family where you had you had a black wife and you had a white man.
Yeah.
And we know, having studied the case law, what they did and how they took them and separated them, and they did all this, And so when I asked earlier, like, we know that civil rights and civil law has progressed and changed as it continues to do, all laws, how does it feel to go into the law legal and see times where certain minorities were not given rights, not allowed to speak, not sit at a counter, and know that you fight for these things now as an attorney?
I mean, it's a situation where you pay homage to what has been done first and foremost, but the reality is, it looks a little different today, but it's still there.
Right.
You know, it's not fully.
Not all
we're
states have ratified every single
right.
thing. Exactly.
And even states that have ratified, or in places even like here, where I'm allowed to practice and essentially do whatever I want, there are still certain things in place, parameters in place, I should say, with respect to certain bodies of groups of individuals that will push that out, or especially in the entertainment industry. You know, if we talk about the entertainment industry, I mean, I think that's the most clear example of how, you know, and obviously we have change, progressive change on a daily basis, but we're not there to the point where it's just clear everyone can do whatever they want,
Right.
you know, at any point in time. It's just, you know, so, you know, I look back at it, I mean, I could only imagine, probably actually I can't even imagine exactly what they were feeling back in those days, the Martin Luther King and Malcolm X days, because, you know.
Well, and the attorneys that helped them.
Oh, man.
Because, you know,
yeah.
those were the people that helped support those things becoming law.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And civil rights matter, man. Us having the right, like,
Absolutely.
I had an aunt who was like, I said something about I agree with progressive politics that are good for society, and somehow she took that as I'm a progressive, and she's like, you're a progressive, and I'm like, no. I said I am all for things that make our society better, going
Right.
in the right direction, like as in progress. You know, the root
Yes.
word progress.
Yes.
And she was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you know, like the right for us to vote as women, for, you know, women's right to choose, for, you know, for certain things to happen that, you know, have made a difference in our society, you know, and which, of course, and I do want to say this because I had talked about, last week when we had another episode, I shared how I haven't stood for the national anthem or for the Star Spangled Banner at a sporting event for over 20 years. And that's largely because of my studying of history, law, and just being a person who was around, you know, growing up in Napa, I was around racism quite a bit. I saw how cops treated people and kids who are not white.
Right.
I saw the good old boy mentality. My husband's from East Texas. I joke, I might as well have grown up in East Texas. And I love Napa. I love that I grew up there, but I'm just not going to sugarcoat it and say that I didn't see these things, because
Right.
I did.
Yeah.
And I saw how people were treated. So seeing how society, you know, and how do we, you know, so we have these things that have happened legally that have progressed for the good, but we still have stigma. We still have changes that need to be made. In your opinion, as attorney working in this field, where do you feel we need to grow dramatically?
We need to first become conscious, become aware, and, you know, a lot of people who I've expressed this opinion with, and since you guys are talking about Trump, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I voted for Bernie Sanders last time. And when he lost, I didn't vote when it came to Hillary or Trump. And my theory was, I would rather not have any snakes in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you know, some people might take that the wrong way, but the Bill Clinton, the Hillary Clinton, like, they hadn't done a lot good for the inner cities. It looked good on the
Right.
surface, and when you actually looked back and peeled it back, you saw what was going on. I'd rather the enemy to be in my face, like Donald Trump. Like, he's not in the grass. He's going to tell you right up front, I'm racist. Well, he may not say those words. He'll say enough for you to see it, though. And so, to me, that was my theory with respect to, and I know we're not going to be too political here, but with respect to that campaign.
Yeah.
But it's because I think that we need to be in a position to where people actually express, you know, what's actually going on. We need to stop
Yeah.
hiding the curtain, like
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz. Unveil. You know,
Yeah.
we need to
I
see what's
agree.
really going on today in society.
No, I agree.
love
That's true, because, you know, and like, yeah, we never endorse one person over the other as far as our public format, but we do, like, I'm about getting people together and have those conversations. Like I said, my aunt, huge Trump supporter, her and I would have discussions, and, you know, all I ever wanted to do was talk about it.
Right.
Like, I don't want to fight about it. I
Right.
want to talk about it. I want to be able to express my opinion with you or my thoughts on it. And then I want you to kind of share yours. And then maybe we agree or maybe we don't, but let's talk about it. And I see both sides. This is
Yeah.
the one thing I have to say, because I see people on all sides, claiming to be all different, backgrounds and political affiliations, liberal, left, right. And I hate, then I see them all doing things I don't agree with, right? Then I see people who do on both sides. I do see people on both sides who do things that I agree with and I can back up. But I want our society to be better, and free speech and opening up, and people are afraid that everyone's taking their guns and all of this. It's like, I just want the fear to be taken out. And I want rationality to come in. Yeah. And I do believe that we need change within our country. I just feel that the people who keep saying that they have our best interests at heart don't always have our best interests at heart. And, that's. So what are the issues that you're most passionate about addressing in your life right now?
Before we go there really quickly, I think, one of the things is that transitions right back what you were just saying, right back to the consciousness. I think that people need to know, because when you have certain people controlling the media, they are going to inundate people with things that are going to trigger fear mechanisms within them. And because they are not conscious, they just are submerged
just
with fear, and it's just like, okay, it is what it is. I'm not going that right. I'm scared of this. Yeah. This is what the status quo is. This is what the prevailing thought is. And so we're going with whatever the prevailing thought is. Yeah. And so that's why I say conscious. We got to become more conscious. And when I say conscious, meaning we got to open a dialogue up to actually talk about this stuff, because, we stopped the way our school systems are. Like I was talking to my mom the other night, my niece. She's just reading and watching a bunch of documentaries and stuff. She's 5. And, the thing is, like, she asks why about everything, and it's the same thing I used to tell my nephew, her older brother, is like, you got to ask why, because, in grade school, you get away from that. This is the way it is. Don't ask why. But why is in our creativity. That's what our creativity is all about. Why is this that way? And when you do away with the question why, you lose your organic thoughts. Yeah. You stop thinking as an individual, and so you're just going whatever the status quo is. So I think before we have any change, it's really going to take us as a society to become a lot more conscious and actually thinking for ourselves, and not just moving with whatever the prevailing thought is.
I love you. You are literally the first person I've met that has put it in such an amazing way. Concise, be conscious. Basically, wake the fuck up. Right. See what's happening. Read. Don't just because all your friends follow this person, like, don't do that. Don't. I'm so glad you said that. Be a leader, not a follower. I'm so glad you said that. Be a leader. And I'm glad that you're touching on using your critical thinking, using the brain that God has given you, using it, because I feel like we don't. We read something and we think this is it, but we don't realize that, for example, like many of our social media platforms, they are ran by certain people who want you to see certain things. I mean, the whole Facebook Analytica scandal, it was all about that. Yeah. And you don't realize it until you watch something that has been happening for years. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm like believing everything that I see. I'm not even critical thinking about anything.
Right.
And we're voting. We're actually voting. Right. It's so crazy.
Well, I mean, I'm sure as an attorney, when you sit a client down and they're saying, okay, I want this, you have to determine probably as one of your first steps, why do you want this? And what will this, what solution are you, or what problem are you solving? Yeah. Right.
Honestly, for me, I very rarely have a client that says, I want this in the area of practice that I deal with. I get clients that say this happened. Right. And then so we talk to figure out, like, my objective is to get the client back how they were the day before it happened. Sure. Right. Whether I can do that with money or whether I can do that with just getting you fixed up, whatever, we'll figure out the course based upon what's going on. But, I rarely have situations where I have clients who say, this is what I want. And quite frankly, if I did have that, I don't know if I'd be turned off or not, because, that's not the objective, is to make you rich here or whatever.
Well, sure. No, I mean, like, because sometimes it's not monetary. I mean, if you sue for, discrimination, some companies will come back and say, oh, you want your job back? Like, what is it that you want as far as what is your end goal here? So that, like you said, you're seeking what your client wants in that sense, not necessarily a monetary failure, which, by the way, I have a kind of funny joke. When I went to law school, that the learned hand formula, the day that came up, the professor, all of us just kind of look, and he's like, I know what you're thinking. If you guys were good at math, you'd be in med school, but y'all are here in law school. And I was like, thank God he said it, and I knew it, because I was like, the minute he said learned hand formula, I was like, wait, what?
My goodness.
I don't like numbers. Give me,
Yeah,
I can
same.
spell
I am the same.
tritetracarbonethylene, but I do not want to freaking even add 39 plus 6, okay? I'm all like, wait, carry the 3.
Calculator.
Yeah. It's just, but it's refreshing to hear you say that. I think that it's an important message for everyone out there. Firstly, to people who just feel that they are going to face a challenge in their life. You do provide the example that you can face those challenges and you can, move forward. I think that, you also bring a bit of style to it.
You
too.
are so
I can tell
fashionable.
you're a man passionate about style. I'm sure our visual audience has gotten, we love the
You're
suit
welcome.
pictures. Yes, you're welcome. Okay, ladies, we do expect thank yous now.
No, thank you.
Are you single?
I am.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so ladies,
We
if so if I happen to be in LA and I feel I've got something, if I wanted to reach out to your firm, what would be the name of the firm I'd look for?
Abron Law.
Abron
PC,
Law.
yes.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, we got a few. Wait. Yes.
we do have time for rapid fire, right?
Yes. We
Okay,
do have
cool.
time for rapid fire.
So before we do this, if you want to watch the documentary that I was talking about, it's called The Great Hack. Watch it and you'll understand exactly what I was talking about, which I think you've watched it too,
I
right?
haven't watched it.
Oh, you gotta watch it. Okay, rapid fire questions. Movie title that explains your love life right now.
Whoa.
well, the thing on the note says explains your life.
Oh,
Currently.
your
let's
life
take it down
currently.
a notch.
Whoa.
I'm sorry.
Life.
You say you're single.
Damn
You
it.
see what happens?
Oh, she tried to be slick.
Oh yeah.
Man, got me sweating now. All right, no, what's the question? It's just,
Fine. Movie title that describes your life.
Currently.
I'm so bad with movie titles. I forget the movie titles.
Okay, let's see.
What's the movie?
He's like the Untouchables.
No, what was the Denzel movie?
The Untouchable.
Training Day.
No, not that.
Equalizer.
That does not
The
define my life
Equalizer.
right
The
now.
Equalizer?
The Equalizer. I'm calling you Equalizer too.
The Equalizer? Wait, I don't even know if I've seen that one.
Denzel. The Equalizer 2 is Denzel. I think the
I
new.
forget the name of the movie.
He did
I'm thinking
good.
About.
He's a man who
Tony,
rights the
where are the
wrongs of
crickets?
others. So there you go. I'm
Right.
telling you. I'm telling you. I know. I'm sitting here answering his rapid fire. That's not how it's
Watch.
supposed to go. But
Okay.
okay.
Describe your worst date in one word.
Horrific? How do you
Horrific.
describe it in one?
Horrific.
Hey,
Scared?
scared? She showed up with a different picture from 10 years ago.
Biggest deal breaker with the future partner.
With a future business partner or
No,
like
like
a
love partner.
romantic
Romantic.
Romantic.
Loyalty. Yeah, or the
Nice.
lack thereof, I should say.
Go ahead.
Stupidest way you've ever hurt yourself.
I don't know. Probably like riding a skateboard or something. I try not to do dumb things.
Right?
I try.
Aalia, have you ever? I feel like this happens to girls because of the pants that we wear. But sometimes you're trying to get something out of your pants and you go boom. Like,
Oh.
have you ever smacked yourself with your own hand for like trying to pull something
I've done
really
a lot
tight?
of
And you go,
things from just
that happens so many times.
like shoot. You should have seen me trying to change.
I
at the
think it's
movie the
just
other
me.
night.
I
No,
think.
that's I
okay.
mean that's happened to me.
This is awkward
That's happened
now.
to me.
No.
Everybody's like, no,
Really?
you're
Like,
weird.
She's cute. She hits herself in the head, but she's cute.
Thank you very much.
Okay, tell our listening audience where they can find you on social media, please.
I'm on Facebook, BJ Abron, social media, Instagram, BJ Abron as well, pretty much. Twitter, I rarely use Twitter, but yeah.
Yes, ladies, if
Yes.
you like them tall, dark, and handsome, please go check it out. Or if you just have a great case or something, sure, should be calling him up.
Sure.
Somebody broke my heart. I need someone to fix it.
Go sue them.
Well, we got to get you back how you was before it happened, right?
Oh my God!
Oh.
Wait, right?
Oh
But
my.
no, wait. I remember. I loss of. Oh my God! What's my favorite word? That I always tell my husband I'm gonna sue his clients for loss of consortium. Wait.
Loss consortium?
Yeah. That's when you aren't getting any more from your partner because of
Yep.
whatever the case is, and then. Yeah, I don't know. I know it was going somewhere totally different. But we got to get out of here, you guys. But it's been so much fun
Thank you
having
guys for having me.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Abron.
Yes.
Thank you
Unsugarcoated
very
with
much.
us, truly. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, comment, find us, reach out to us, Alex and I, on social media. Give us your feedback, and subscribe to our mailing list.
Share this episode with whoever you need, who
Yeah.
you think needs it.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your hosts, Aalia and Alex.